Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 132 of Experience Data Talk, a show featuring data science leaders and technologists from around the world. My name is Mike Delgado, and today we're honored to learn from Nicole Blake Johnson, managing editor at GovLoop. We first met Nicole in episode 43, when she talked with us about ways the government solves critical problems with data. And I caught up with her recently because she's been writing about racial equity in the workplace and ways that all of us could become more inclusive and driven by empathy, especially during times of crisis and social unrest. And when you have the time, I encourage you to check out her articles. You can follow her on LinkedIn, and I also posted links to her articles on our Experian blog. The URL is ex.pn/Nicole. So, during COVID-19, we've seen an increase in social unrest, racism, xenophobia, and violence directed at our Black communities. And we've all had to figure out how to navigate these periods in the workplace. Like, how do we talk about it? And what is the right way to talk about these issues? So, in this episode, Nicole shares with us ways to help employees feel emotionally safe, and also how to nurture team relationships during times of crisis. Nicole also shares with us how leaders should address and discuss social unrest, and ways for us to manage our mental health, well-being at work, and how to manage and deal with toxic leadership. At the end of the show, Nicole leaves us with a lot of wisdom around how to grow in empathy, and also questions we can ask to help us grow in our understanding and compassion for others. This is a super powerful episode, and I encourage you to share it with your friends and colleagues. Here's our conversation. Nicole, thank you so much for being on Data Talk.
Thank you for having me. Long time no see, right?
I know. So, Nicole, I saw your recent article. You've been writing a lot, and I saw your recent article about 19 questions for leaders who are serious about racial equity. And I love the fact that you addressed racism in the workplace and also diversity and inclusion, because I feel like diversity and inclusion and companies talking about how they're anti-racist and against racism, like that's like a human thing. Of course, a company should be diverse and inclusive. Of course, a company should be against racism. And that's like on tons of company websites to say we're a diverse and inclusive company. But what does it actually mean? And so I'm really glad you wrote that article to like address like actionable things that leaders need to be thinking about, because it comes down to the employees. It comes down to the leadership on how are they actually being inclusive, and how are they addressing microaggressions? How are they addressing things that are being approached to them about, hey, I feel like I'm being attacked here. When COVID-19 first started, some of the initial conversation I was seeing was there was a lot of xenophobia, especially online as I was doing social media monitoring. There was an increase in racism towards the Asian community early on. And there was even a campaign called Hate is a Virus that was specifically targeting, because Asians were being targeted, and people were talking about COVID-19 being the Chinese flu, right? So that was happening in the very beginning. So right when the pandemic was happening, we started to see racism like becoming more visible. It was always there,
Right.
but it was becoming like almost like people felt more okay to be racist. And they were looking for someone to blame. And then when George Floyd was murdered on video and that began to spread, that changed everything. And so as a company, we were like, obviously we're going to speak out against it and stand with the Black community. But it also brought another question about like, what are we actually going to be doing about it? It's not enough to just say, of course we oppose this, of course we stand with the Black community, but what else are we going to be doing? Not only with donations going forward, but also like, how are we making Experian like a diverse and inclusive culture? So I've been very proud like what Experian's been doing, but I wanted to kind of just start this conversation around that.
Yeah.
And kind of hear from you about, as you have been kind of observing all of this and also needing to be working during this time in the midst of all this, like how have you been kind of managing your emotions coming into the workplace? And then what would be some things you would suggest to leaders who maybe have been very privileged, have not experienced that form of racism, and are not even sure, like, I don't even feel comfortable even talking about it. I don't even know if this person wants to talk to me about it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the, I'll just leave it there. You can run with
Yeah,
it.
no, you were ministering to my soul. Everything you said was just yes, yes, and I wish there were more people in places of management who not only understood that, but then actually took action and lived out what they said that they believed. But that's such an interesting question. Actually, I was thinking, going about my day to day, and just this phrase, just I couldn't stop thinking about it. The fact that being able to protect and conserve your energy is a superpower. And I tweeted that out because I was like, gosh, that feels so strong, because you wake up, your life doesn't stop happening. I'm a parent, I have a 3-year-old, so I'm still a mom, I'm still a wife, I'm still a manager, I still have things that I need to do in my personal life. And then on top of that, you have all of these things happening. And there is such an emotional toll that people can't visibly see that all the time. Like, yes, I've had my breakdown on a go-to meeting, and I totally was not expecting it. Sitting in a manager's meeting, having a conversation about all that's going on, and really thanking my teammates for being supportive and what they've done, and literally just like could not hold it together. And I pride myself on someone who can hold it together, be strong for my team. But in that moment, it was just murder after murder you're hearing about. We're in the pandemic. It compounded together was just so much, and I needed to take a minute. And I'm grateful that I have a boss who looks out for me, who is like, have some time, creating that space. And we've been talking a lot about psychological safety and how important that is. And the way that he broke it down, that really has just stuck with me, is, do employees feel like they're in a safe environment where they can say what they need and what they think? And if you were not in a position to do that before all of this happened, why would anyone feel safe now to do that? When I think about managers and leaders of companies, I totally get that there's this uncertainty about not being sure what to say. You're hesitant. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to mess up. But people can see your heart. If you were genuine and caring before going into this, and being honest and saying, look, I might not fully understand exactly what you're going through, but I want to be there for you. Like, we care about you. And that's what you have to ask yourself as a manager. Do I care, as a leader? Do I care about my team as, like, on a human level? Do I care about them? Can I relate to them? Or is it just about us meeting numbers, pushing papers? Because those types of teams, I think, especially in this environment, even if everyone knew that's the way things were, it's being exposed and felt on another level that's really challenging. And so people really just have to stop. People are more than logging on Slack and coming to your company Zoom meetings and having to meet numbers. Like, they're humans and people. And if you can't relate to them on that level, you have to stop and ask yourself why. What is wrong with me that I can't even try to or want to understand? Because when people feel cared for and feel safe, there's no telling what that opens up, another dimension of the work relationship, that your team flourishes in a way that, gosh, you probably couldn't have even imagined, because people really see that you care about them. People work. I've seen the things that team members are willing to, they go above and beyond. They're not just satisfied employees, they're engaged employees, and they care. So that piece that I wrote, the 19 questions, it honestly didn't even start. I didn't even set out to write an article. I really was sitting down. No, it wasn't. It didn't even start as an article. It started as, I legit have questions for leaders at companies.
Good.
Legit,
Yeah.
what I want to ask them. Because
you're like processing it.
It was. I literally opened up a Google Doc and just started writing down all these questions. And I was like, I had it sitting in my file for, days, a week or so. And I was like, you know what? These are real questions that other people should know and should be asking. And that's when I wrote the post. So
I love that you had the courage to post it, because whenever people are addressing very hot topics, especially dealing with racism, content like that can be misconstrued. People can take it the wrong way, unfortunately, and it takes a tremendous amount of courage to, like, publish something like that. And it was like outstanding, fantastic work,
Mm.
great questions, but it takes a tremendous amount of courage to put it out there. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for having the courage to put it out there. I'm wondering also about like, what was some of the responses, feedback you were getting?
Yeah, very positive feedback. And you're right. When you, there's like a level of conviction that I have when I write things that it's moved beyond this, like, oh, I need to, put this out or do this, where I have a deep conviction about what I'm writing that moves me to take action. And I, again, have a supportive team, so I don't feel like there's going to be retribution. They're very supportive. If anything, they're like, "Oh, we need to post that story." Like, I was like, "I'm going to post it. Calm down." But you go back and forth on the headline. You're like looking over your own words, like, "Oh my gosh, did I, say something? Could someone take it in a certain way?" So, right, you think all of these things, but for me, writing this was just like, I want this to be a conversation. Like, most of the stories I write are in the tech and management space and focus on government. But I'm like, we can talk about all these other things, blockchain, cloud, and AI, which are great. Don't get me wrong. Like, we need that in our life. But what's behind that technology is real people with real feelings, real hurts, and real issues. And I find that it's not these issues that we're talking about. These are the things that make strong teams or break teams. And if you can't get this right, we're sitting around here, like trying to tackle all these other issues when we haven't figured out the main thing. And this is the main thing. If someone doesn't feel valued or welcome on a team or in a company, that's a problem. And really, I look across the landscape and I just, see so many different people who there is not that outlet or that space at their company to have these conversations. So they're walking around feeling this way, not having anyone to talk to at work. And so their options are, you stay in this environment because we're in a pandemic. I need to take care of my family. Do I just suck it up and keep going, put on a happy face for my Zoom calls and make it work? Or do I say something and risk it all, not knowing what type of retaliation there will be against me? All of this while I still need to get done the work that I need to get done. And I was just like, I'm willing to, put that out there. And the response is, oh my gosh, I love our community. So I was like, there are amazing people, but there are people who are just like, I really want to have this. First off, thank you. I want to have this conversation with my team, but I'm not sure how to do it. I wrote a post before this one on creating space for honest conversations at work. And it's just, I see a lot of, I'm not sure. And so in response to the, I'm not sure what to do, I said, okay, well then start by looking internally, start by looking at yourself and asking yourself these questions. Because you're right, it's more than a statement. And people want to know that when people are interviewing for jobs and they have options, they don't just want to go somewhere with a boilerplate language on the website. They want to know, well, what does that mean? How are you taking care of your people during the pandemic? What have you done in response to the social unrest? Those were two questions. And, different interviews I've done with people in government who are onboarding folks, those were questions that were coming up that people had. And so I was pleased to see that people who I'm usually only talking to about tech or management issues realized the importance of this and really embraced this conversation. So that gave me hope. I was pleased to see that. But it's just that this is not a one post and ask myself these questions.
Right.
So what's that project do?
Right.
Next. This is work. This is ongoing. This is a business. Like, even if you're not, if you're a dollar and cents person, this is still a dollar and cents issue. So people really have to take this seriously. And if you don't take it seriously, you have to ask yourself why. Why don't I care?
That's right. And I'm glad that you're mentioning that, because sometimes we feel like it's a checkbox. Like, oh yeah, I'm doing all those things, great, moving on. But actually, no, these are questions we have to be thinking about all the time, checking in on ourselves about what we're doing. How are we creating safe places for our employees? How are we leading with empathy in everything that we're doing? I was actually talking with somebody, because when the pandemic first started and we started seeing the increase in xenophobia, spreading around the world. So part of our job in social media is to do monitoring. Like we're monitoring conversations, topics that are important to our consumers, our target audiences. Part of monitoring means we're going to be encountering very traumatic imagery, hateful content, racist content, etc. And I had to step back and say, there might be people on my team that are not comfortable reporting on this content. Part of our job is to report, right? So as I was talking to my team, I said, if I ever give you a project that you are in any way feeling traumatized by it, re-victimized, of course you don't have to do it. You just let me know, hey, Mike, I can't do this right now. You have to please raise your hand. Please let me know. And I've been having more of those conversations. And I also have to be very intentional when I'm passing on a project that I'm thinking very clearly when I pass on this project to someone to write about this thing or to report on something, can this topic hurt this person? Because I don't know if it's a COVID-19 situation, do they have a loved one who has COVID-19? And me having them report on COVID-19 is probably not the best thing for them because they're so concerned with their loved one. Like I've been having to like think through everything. Like empathy is not just the relationship and the conversations. It's like every project you're passing on, you have to be thinking about, is this going to hurt somebody? And so part of the work for me has been like having a lot more conversations and like letting people know if I ever give you a project, if I ever like send you a request to do something that you're not comfortable doing for whatever reason, you don't have to tell me. Say, hey, Mike, can't do this one. Cool, got it. I don't even need to know. You don't need to tell me anything. Just, I got it. But yeah, all of the situation with the pandemic, Black Lives Matter movement, the xenophobia, things that were happening during Pride Month, like all this stuff, I'm like, we have so many serious issues going on. And how do we as managers, how do we as leaders navigate these periods with our employees and address things and let people know that we are open and ready to support them? And like you said, like the very beginning, like if you're not doing that now, when the crisis happens, how do you expect people to come to you? Because they don't feel comfortable talking to you. And they're going to feel like, well, HR probably told them to reach out to me and gave them the messaging. And so, yeah, you're right. It comes down to the heart of the person. You got to have that.
Are you going to do a manager's training session, Mike? Because you're right. It is such a matter of the heart because there are certain things that you can require managers to do, but then there are other things that people are going to do not because they have to, be because they recognize a need. Like the fact that you were able to filter through and understand, you know, yes, you've created the space, but even when the space is created, even still saying, okay, I'm being mindful, right? Mindful leadership about what I'm sending to the team. You know, I had this conversation with my boss the other day and, you know, feeling empowered as a parent, as a member of the team, as a manager to say like, all right, I need this time to go take care of my kid. I am in a safe space to do that. But even sometimes I still have to battle this little guilt where I'm like, oh, but I have to go do this thing. And so if I feel that way in a very safe environment, how is someone going to feel in a toxic environment? How are they going to feel? And so, you know, it's one thing, like you said, HR told me to say, all right, if you need time, take time. But it's like, okay, so they're saying one thing, but their actions have showed me another thing leading up to this and even now. And so I think it's more than the open door policy saying you can come and talk to me. It's taking that initiative and meeting the person where they are and sharing and talking. And this kind of stuff, it does take more time. It does take more energy. But as a manager, as a leader, your first responsibility is your people. And a lot of managers and leaders have lost sight of that. They prioritize other things above their people. And so now when their people are hurting, now I hope they're trying to reconnect and establish something, but they also have to be mindful that that's going to take time and you have to be willing to put in the work to do that. You don't just tell someone one time, you know, you're psychologically safe here. If you don't want to do this, don't do it. And then expect them to come to you. You have to demonstrate through words and actions that you mean what you say. And that's huge. You know, like did anyone have to come to you and say, Mike, I think that your employees might be going through some things, or you never know, you should be mindful of no one had to come to you and tell you that.
That's right. That's right. You should know your team so well that you've been giving space. You've been having those one-on-ones that people feel comfortable talking to you. And also some of that stuff you should just like, you don't even have to like, if you know your team really well and situations are coming up, you don't have to even talk to the person initially. You kind of already know.
Right.
They need some space and they know they can come talk to me when they're ready to. And I'm going to be sending notes and just emails, letting them know that I care for them. But they may not be ready to talk, and that's okay. But I'm just letting them know, like, I'm here. However you want to communicate, because I know during this time, like, some people don't want to be on video calls. It's just too much. And so, and I know for me, like, I'm very, like, I like seeing people. Like, I love being on video calls, right? Mm-hmm. But I've had to, like, scale back and go, like, because in the beginning I was, like, getting judgmental. Like, oh, they never want to be on video calls. My initial reaction, the wrong reaction, was like, oh, they're not ready to engage. Like that was my initial wrong reaction. Mm-hmm. But then as I started to really think about it, I'm like, wait a minute, not everyone feels comfortable being on video. There could be a lot of things going on. They might not have a place to even do a video call from where they're living right now. Okay. And there are a lot of reasons why. They might not be emotionally ready to be on video for you. So I just like, I immediately changed my meeting notices. I was like, you come however you want to do it. And I said, if you can't make the call for whatever reason, you don't need to make the call. Like, just like send me a little note, text me, say, hey, Mike, can't make it today. All good. Like, everyone's going through their own thing right now. And part of empathy is like letting people connect with you however they want to during that period of time. And we shouldn't be offended that they don't want to meet us the way that we want to be met. Mm. And that some of that is like, because with my team, like we all understand each other. Like we spent so much time together. So I'm very fortunate leading into the pandemic that we had a good relationship going in. It would be more difficult for just hiring somebody to kind of gain that trust, because they have to trust you too. Because when someone's first joining a company, it's like everyone's on their best behavior, right? It takes time to establish trust. It's like when you're dating somebody.
I was just going to say that.
Right?
You don't show them your true color.
Yeah.
You see what you're going to get, but I'm just like, you say those true colors, I'm going to give you a little sprinkle.
Yeah, that's right. And it takes time to establish trust. So managers going into the pandemic and also dealing with social unrest that had empathy, who cared, who've already created the safe spaces, like they're good. Like not that they have everything figured out. Of course they don't, but at least they have that relationship there. But for those who haven't built that relationship, it's going to be extremely hard to have anybody even open up to you, especially if they haven't seen you be vulnerable. And that's nothing I want to share with you. Like, I found during this time, like with my team, that I've actually grown closer than ever before. And I actually thought during this pandemic, I would be like, the relationship would be hurt because we're not in the same room together. And I have found that my relationship with my team has gotten better because I've been more transparent, more vulnerable than I've ever been. Because I'm coming to them saying, I don't know what to say about this issue. I've been privileged. I recognize my privilege. And I'm just being completely upfront about my own lack of insight. And like, I need to get educated on the history of what the Black community has gone through in America. Like, I'm like addressing these things. And like, I have a lot of work to do. And like, I'm addressing these things. And I found that just by being vulnerable and open, you have to do it first. I think leaders need to step up and you be vulnerable first. Don't expect them to come to you. Like, say what's on your mind. Don't expect them to come back to you and say, oh, because you've now shared something vulnerable, I'm not going to, it doesn't work like that. But first, like leaders, you want to create and show empathy. Start by being vulnerable. It's going to be really uncomfortable, but that's the first step.
That's so huge. I like retweet everything that you just I retweet everything that you just said. You're right. And I feel the same way about my team. And when you think about it, like, we're in each other's homes, right? We use a lot of video at our company, but you're right. We had the conversation about, making things optional and people being able to say what's comfortable or turning things off or on. And that's not, you know, being disrespectful or anything, but really gets down to like a trust issue, right? Like, do you trust, and are you showing that you trust people, especially in this space? But I am the same way. I find myself, our weekly touch bases go over because you are taking that extra time to be like, for real, like, how are you doing? Like, you don't need to get in all the projects yet. Like, how are you doing today? Like, how were you doing yesterday? Like, I think especially for high functioning teams who have learned how to make it work and we're getting projects done and still going, I never forget that we're still in the middle of a pandemic. People are still getting shot and dying. Family members are dying from COVID. Like, there's so many things going on, even though we've found ways to still make it work. Like, your Monday could be completely different from your Wednesday. It could be completely different from your Friday. Before we got on, we were talking about, right, just like hour to hour, like for this hour, like, how do I make this work? Do I need to take a step back? Do I need to, take a breather or a break? And so I really felt, convicted about modeling that behavior. And so I, will say like, hey, I taking time off to go hang out with Devin and play monster trucks. Or, my husband, he took 2 days off for me to be fully engaged at
That's
a
awesome.
professional development conference we have. And so that after those 2 days, I said, hey, you guys, I'm taking this afternoon off to reciprocate and take time off to be with my family too. Not just let people know it's okay, but to show them it's okay. And like, that starts at the highest levels. If I didn't feel empowered to do that, then how could I ensure like my team would feel that way, to say it, but to model it and to just keep being mindful? Because you're right, someone can be completely fine on Tuesday and something could have triggered something, and on Wednesday it's like really tough. And so I think it's assuming the best. Like, that's something we always say on our team, and it's easy to say that, it's hard to do that sometimes, but that's where the work comes in. And so it's like, if someone is off on Wednesday, like, why are you assuming that they're like not being productive, you're not doing that? Like, how do you know? They could have gotten a phone call about something happened, or like, I don't know, they could have gotten an email that their rent's increasing and they're like, I was barely making it before. So that's where you create these spaces where people feel comfortable talking to you. And when people trust you and know that you care about them, golly, your team can operate on a whole different level as humans, but also, as a team. So that's huge.
Yeah, I think like that vulnerability and also modeling that, like you were saying, like, is super important for leaders. And like lately, like, I've been dealing with a lot of anxiety and panic attacks. And so when I'm canceling meetings, like with them, I'll have like one-on-one scheduled. When I cancel the meeting, I like let them know why. Like, it's not because I'm busy on some project. Like, I'm letting them know, like, I'm actually having some anxiety issues and I can't talk right now. And like, just that little insight into my life, like, I'm being a little bit vulnerable, because I let them know, like, it's okay. Like, it's okay. Like, we all get anxious. We all have situations in our lives, and I'm letting you know, like, I'm canceling this meeting. I'm not just canceling it because I'm busy with something else more important. It's because I'm actually having some problems, and it's okay. Like, I'm letting you know, like, it's okay to have anxiety, and you can also cancel on me for the same reason. You don't have to tell me, but I'm just letting you know this is why I am doing it. But that's how, like, I'm just finding, like, by that vulnerability, like, I'm just like drawing closer. I could tell them anything. Like, I feel like I can just tell them anything. Yeah. And sometimes I feel like, am I oversharing? But I'm like, well, actually, you know what? During this time, during this pandemic, I'm gonna overshare. I'll tell you whatever.
hey, this is who I'm exactly who you see. That's,
yeah.
Gosh, man, it's such a breath of fresh air. I can imagine people listening, for those who don't have that. I think there's people reevaluating their places of employment and decisions to stay at a place based on this. Because even if you knew that your manager was a certain way before this, or you knew the culture was a certain way, for whatever reason, you might not have had the option to choose from 4 and 5. you're trying to tough it out and make it work for you, for your family, or for whatever reason you decide to stay. But when you're in an environment where it's affecting your health, like you
Yes.
can, the stress of the world is one thing, but then it's like the pressures from your job, like you can't, people are questioning now, do I stick this out or do I value my health and well-being? And even if I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do if I leave this job, for me to make it tomorrow, I have to walk away from this. And so
That's right.
I don't know if enough employers recognize that and are taking the time to really do that real work, to have those conversations.
And you know what I get worried about too is the new grads, the people just entering the workforce who don't have any sort of model of like what a good leader is.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're brought into a workplace, and I remember early in my career, I had some very toxic leaders. And when you have that initially just coming into the workspace, that's your model. And you're like, oh, I guess this is the way it is. I guess they've been operating this way for a long time. The company trusted them to be my manager. I guess that's just the way this company is. And I just, whenever I'm chatting with people or interviewing, I'm like, if you're ever in a toxic environment, get out as soon as possible, because like you just said, your mental health, your own well-being, how you value yourself is so much more important. And I know this, like, people might be listening and going, well, that's nice when you have money coming in, you're secure. The hardest thing is leaving that when you don't have security. Like I need food on the table. I have a payment to make for rent. It's not so easy to just leave a toxic environment. I totally agree. I've been there. I know, but you're right. We have to put our mental health, our physical health, our well-being in front of everything else. And I also want people to know that are just entering the workplace, like that is not okay. It's never okay. If you find yourself in a toxic environment, get out as soon as possible. Report it. Hopefully, the HR team will deal with that situation, move you to another team. But I feel so bad for those who, especially during this pandemic, where it's really hard to get a job, where you feel stuck or you feel lucky to have the job, and then to be in a situation where your leader is just toxic, treating you poorly, you don't feel safe. Like that's just multiplying your own issue, because we're all dealing with different issues, and that just makes it far worse.
Oh man, you are speaking truth on so many levels. And it's crazy when there's things that are so tragic and horrendous and ugly, and something beautiful can come from something so devastating. One of the things I have seen is more people being open to mentor, provide opportunities to, and not just because someone is Black or brown, but because they were qualified, but there was never space made for them. Try to make your own space, but you're told, actually, you can back there. That's where you belong, not at this head table. But I'm seeing so much of that now, where I don't know if anyone's interested in what I'm talking about. I have a Google Doc handy, but it's, circulated online, where you have all these CEOs and different people who have put their calendars, like made them open and available for people to just put time on their calendar to ask for advice or help in a lot of different areas. So for people who are feeling like, gosh, I'm in this space and I have these skill sets and I don't feel like I'm being valued here, there are people who are now coming to the table and saying, hey, actually, let me pull up a chair for you. Like, you belong at this table. I see you. And it's not that people don't have the skills. Sometimes it just takes opportunity. You can have all the skills in the world, but if there's not opportunity, yes, you try to create your own, but to see that there are people who recognize that has been really, and it's come out of, like you said, we talked earlier with George Floyd's death, you definitely saw this shift and this turning point. And it's sad that you've had even more people killed since that time. But then to see that there are some beautiful things that are happening, that people are saying, you know what, like I want to do my part. And, my part is this, I have the skill set to offer, I have this platform, and I want to elevate other voices. So that's been really cool. I do a little writing on the side. Oh, I write, that's my day job, but like, I love reading children's books with my son. And there is this gentleman online, Antoine, which I know his last name. I'm giving him all kinds of shout outs, but he and I don't know if they were friends or colleagues, but they knew each other and they started this group, Black Kid Lit. And so these are, Black
Oh,
writers and illustrators who do this work and are in this space, who are talented in so many fascinating ways. And he's lined up all these different chats where they bring in different editors and people from publishing companies to come talk to people, and the writers can pitch their work and all kinds of things. And so
that's
to see
awesome.
that, like, there are these communities growing and thriving, and people are saying, you know what, I I'm going to step out on that thing that I've had on my heart. There are some spaces that I'm seeing that are being created now, and I want to step into that. So I'd say, for the people who are like, man, I'm looking for a change, or this, and what's happening now has opened my eyes to say I need to be thinking about what my next move is. There are people out there who really want to support you and who really want to help.
That's beautiful. I want to look into that because that is so cool. Black Kid Lit. That's
It's a whole
awesome.
hashtag on Twitter.
I
Like,
love
I was
that.
like, y'all are dope. Like, I remember going to the first meeting online, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are so accomplished. Like, there are people who have agents and like books out and everything. And I'm just so, and it's back earlier, we were talking about the heart issue. Like, everyone wants everyone to win. Everyone's supporting each other and just are really there teaching people. Like, there were things I didn't even know about, like page counts and different things you have to think about when you're pitching a children's book and all these things that I'm
Mm,
like, whoa, like, you know how many courses I would have had to take to learn all this stuff, and to have people setting aside their time to teach us these things. I was like, this is amazing. So there are people out there with good hearts who are pulling up chairs and bringing out new tables so that there's more room for everybody, which has been really nice.
I love that. And that has been I think some of the beautiful parts that have emerged during all the crisis that has happened. We're starting to see some communities form, people activated to do something to improve certain communities. And you mentioned George Floyd, and I'll tell you that when George Floyd was murdered by police, I had a meeting the next day that I had to leave. And I want to ask you, like, your advice for leaders when crisis happens, when someone is murdered and is impacting a certain community, and your team might be part of that community. Like, how should a leader
Yeah.
respond during the time? Because I'll tell you that when that happened, I'm still processing my own feelings, and I'm having all these feelings. And even personally on social during that time, I was like seeing debates about how people should respond that are not part of the Black community. And I'm like, because I'm like, I want to do the right thing, right? And like you said, like, how can we elevate the right voices? So then at that point, I was like, okay, the least I can do is just elevate important voices that need to be heard during this time. So I was like basically retweeting. That's all I could do, because
Yeah.
my voice doesn't need to be elevated at this point. Other voices need to be elevated. And then when I can process things, I can. But for me, like, having that meeting the next day, I was like, I don't even know like what to say. And this can come like we're talking specifically about George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, but this can happen to any community.
Right.
Our pride community, when LGBTQ people are killed, the trans community, like. But specifically about George Floyd, I was like, I I live in an area where there's not many Black people here in Orange County, and I've not worked with very many Black people. And so I'm like, I recognize I'm not educated in Black history. And so that's my own fault. Like, I have a lot of work to do to get educated. But then I'm coming in like, okay, now I'm not educated. I realize my privilege. I now need to lead a meeting. This is something that needs to be addressed. We're dealing with it on social media. And so I basically just went in like just sharing that. Like, this is how I'm feeling, and I'm just sharing like what I just told you, like basically all
Yeah.
that. And also like feeling inadequate, feeling it's out of my control. I can't do anything about it. I was kind of like sharing all that. Like, this is how I'm feeling, and all these feelings are not right. Like, there are things I can do about it. There are things I can get educated. There's all these things I can do. But in the moment, when something's first happening and you're still like processing through, and as a leader, people are looking to you, or as a manager, people are looking to you to like, well, I wonder what they're going to say about this. And
Or if they're going
sometimes
to say anything at all.
or say anything at all. So I guess like my question, Nicole, would be like, for all of us who are struggling in a time of crisis, we're trying to process it ourselves, but then like we still have to be managing during that time. Like your advice for how to navigate those very difficult periods.
Yeah. Wow. I first off really commend you for how you handled that with your team. What's interesting is that I look at different issues, right? Diversity and inclusion. You have all other issues that companies deal with, cybersecurity, everything like that. Those things are tough. And even when people don't know what to do, they're still kind of taking what do I know at a basic level? I know that, I should communicate to my employees the importance of cyber, whatever it is. Like for these really hard things, we seem to know what to do.
Right. That's right.
And for diversity and inclusion,
that's true.
there's this tweet that was like, I was gonna, but then and he was like, and I said, and I was like, oh, are you gonna? And then I was like, whoa. And then it's like, they're talking about how they were getting ready to do a D&I program. And I was like,
It's so true.
And it's
so true.
Oh gosh, I felt that. And so it's like the fear of not saying the right thing can stop people from saying anything. But I would encourage you, lead with your heart. Think of something that means a lot to you, an issue that, and maybe, if you don't feel the connection or which that's a whole nother podcast, but if there's an issue that you feel very strongly about and that issue was constantly in your face, what would you want someone to say to you? Even if they didn't know everything, what would you want them to say to you? And so I think the way you approached it was just having a conversation. You don't have to have a script and 3 bullet points and a circle back in 3 days. One of the things I love that the head of GovLoop did is we had a team meeting planned, and he stopped and talked to us, shared with us, in college, he had a professor who did the, freedom rides and what his experiences have been and things that he's struggling with. He opened it up and made it okay to say, I don't know, but I still want to be here for you. How do you feel? And if you don't feel safe sharing that in this meeting, there are a series of other places and spaces for you to say that. We started a Slack channel for, allies to put stories or share things in there, do different things, because people share and respond in different ways. And not everyone is comfortable opening up at the team meeting, but it's the answer is not continuing on as if nothing happens. Like, don't, hey, yeah, so if you're going to acknowledge it, yeah, this happened. And okay, so back to this meeting. Like, he totally shifted the meeting. Like, that meeting that was on the books got moved to another day. Like, he literally sat and took the time to talk to us. And that meant everything to me. It wasn't just the tweet or the lip service. It's, what are you doing behind closed doors? I love that people want to be vocal about showing their support. But after you've given the folks Juneteenth off, after you've changed the Aunt Jemima pancake box, after you've torn down the statues, you really have to look at yourself and ask, how are my actions and my words impacting real people? What am I doing to, we had a speaker at one of our recent Next Gen training summits, and she's like, whose hands are you acknowledging and whose hands are you ignoring? And you have to ask, like, that's the work that I need to do. What am I doing or not doing? I think sometimes in doing these things outwardly, it makes us feel like we're doing something, right? But then we still have to go back to our virtual offices or in office and interact with real people. And so I think the first step is just being honest and acknowledging. And not that you always have to bring it up at every meeting, but, as you acknowledge it, when there are conversations ongoing, or like we, saw the recent shooting in Wisconsin, there are people hurting now. And so saying, if you need space and time, like, I'm here, how can I support you? And if supporting you means giving you some space, like, I want to do that. I think it's the transparency and the sharing that goes a long way, because I'm totally, if, my manager comes to me and said, I don't understand, but I want to understand. And it's not that you're asking your Black employees to give you a Black history keynote address with bullets and a report. It's me really wanting to understand. I will never forget, I heard on this podcast, someone asked people this question, like, to understand from your employees, like, what's it like to be you? Mm. What's it like? And I don't know. And I want to know so that I can be here to support you, because my number one job as a manager is to help you succeed and remove barriers for you to do well and to thrive. And so when you come with that genuineness, people can look past he doesn't really get everything, but he wants to. And so I want to go on this journey with this manager. So the way you handled it, I kudos, and commend you to keep doing that.
Well, I love that question you just asked. That's a very powerful one. Like, help me to understand what it's like to be you. That is such a powerful question. And to have any sort of honesty coming back means that you developed a good relationship. The person can trust you with that feedback. Not that even if you have that trust, they may not, because they're not in the right headspace to do so. But you have to, at least the bare minimum, have that going back to the heart, the empathy. That relationship has to be built there in order for that answer to even come back in a legitimate way. That's a powerful question. I'm glad you raised that one. Ooh.
I asked my husband that question too. I'm like, we've been married 10 years, but I still ask him, right? What's it like to be you? There's things that each of us face in our own respective ways. And there's things we face up here that we don't always even say out loud. And to have someone really care enough to ask you that. So
another brilliant conversation with you. Thank you for jumping on Data Talk. And I'll be putting links out to your articles on the blog. Everyone, the blog will be ex.pn/Nicole. That'll go over to our Experian News blog with links to your LinkedIn articles, and also ways for you to follow Nicole on LinkedIn so you can keep up with her work and her writing. Nicole, thank you so much for being part of Data Talk.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I'm definitely looking forward to continuing the conversation and coming back. This is real stuff. I walked away learning things too, so this was good. Thank you.
I always learn listening to you, so thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Data Talk podcast. We share new shows every week, and you can find the full catalog of previous episodes, including YouTube videos, on our Experian News blog. You can get access to the full catalog by going to experian.com/datatalk. And we always love hearing from our community, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future shows or guests you'd like to hear from, please let us know. You can leave a comment on iTunes, or you can reach out to us on Twitter @Experian Data Lab. You can also email me directly. My email is michael.delgado@experian.com. Take care, and we'll chat next week.